Hey folks, Joe Morris with Answers, Heaven Speaks. We're definitely getting into a very, very interesting part of the story of Christ now. We're going to have him going up on trial before Pilate, the Roman governor, and I'll tell you a funny little story. But first, let's take a peek around the area again. Let me switch this around. And just wanted to show you, oh gosh, I hope that isn't a mess. See, we still have a tree there. I'm up here in Playa de los Cocos, and I'll tell you why. The reason why we still have a tree, because today was also Christmas as well. Because what they celebrate down here in Mexico is the day that, let me take my glasses off so I don't trip. We got some sunset there. Getting close. Sunset's getting close. But in Mexico, they celebrate the day that the three wise men came and delivered gifts to Jesus, which was exactly 12 days after his birth. So that's what they celebrate down here as kind of a, and this thing is saying trying to reconnect, but just wanted to give you a little bit of a look at what I get to look at every day. And I'm a little bit far away from my modem, so this thing is kind of cutting out a little bit. It's my house down there. There's some neighbors. Buenas tardes. Anyway, I've got some neighbors next door, so I don't want to interfere their seclusion or their privacy. But it's a beautiful day. But I really want to get into this story. Walk back in here again. It's an amazing story. Just Jesus. Amazing story of Jesus. This thing keeps cutting. Hopefully, I didn't lose my Wi-Fi, but let me switch it back around here again. Hope that I don't hit the wrong button. Come on. There we go. Back again. Anyway, so that's the story. That's why we have a Christmas tree up 12 days after Christmas, and Tawny got a present this morning. And a lot of the Mexican children get presents on this day, because this was actually the day, 12 days after Jesus' birth, that the three wise men. It's kind of funny because Drew's got a son, Joshua, and he's, oh gosh, what is he? I guess he's 30 now. But when he was in grade school, they did a Christmas story, and he became one of the three wise men. And he was so proud of being one of the three wise men. He was running around telling everybody, "Hey, you guys, I'm one of the three wise guys. I'm one of the three wise guys." So we kind of make fun that it was 12 days after Jesus' birth that the three wise guys showed up and brought presents to Jesus. And I also noticed today that today in Russia, in the Russian Orthodox Christian Church, today is Christmas over in Russia. So maybe that's why you still see some people having trees, especially with as many Hispanics that are in California and all over the United States now. And you go, God, what's the matter with them? How come they're so lazy? How come they don't take down their trees? How come they don't take down their lights? You know, it's 12 days after Christmas. You know, life is supposed to be going on. Well, there's a reason for it, because there's more of a celebration, So I think our tree will finally come down now and get ready and get all of our lights all twisted up so they'll be almost impossible to bring out next year. But so that's pretty much it. Anyway, again, I'm Joe Morris with Answers, Heaven Speaks. Almost said Coastal Country Real Estate. That's the name of my company. But which I'm basically retired from. Although I still have some agents, and I'm getting off on a tangent. Got a message from Marisa that she's got some business to take care of, so she'll try to listen as we're doing the show today, but she's having to take care of some insurance businesses. And so she said that she should be ready just about at the hour mark. Now, I'm kind of torn. Let me just give you a little bit of a heads up. Some weeks ago, we were asked by Jesus to, in a session after one of our storytelling lessons, to keep the crucifixion and the resurrection together. But I've done some advanced planning, so to speak, here. And the only way I could do that is I would have to have literally a 4-hour show. 4 hours. Who's going to watch 4 hours? Because there's some interim things that happen. Like today we're going to go through the trial of Jesus. And I'll take it as far as it has to go, even if I have to go over an hour. But it should run about an hour. But then comes, after the trial comes, what's it called? Let's see, 185, 186 is the, just before the crucifixion. So we get to learn what happens to Judas, and we find out if Mary comes. We find out about David Zebedee running all over Palestine, bringing the news out to all the hinterlands of Palestine. Then we have the crucifixion, and then we have the time in the tomb, which comes before the resurrection. And then we get to the resurrection. We also have another section after that, which talks about what happens after the resurrection. And then it pretty much goes to a lot of discussion by the universe personalities about the whole story. And that will pretty much end it. And we do not get off into the story of the apostles and where they go. You can learn that in the Bible. You can go to all of Paul's epistles in the Bible to find out what the apostles did. And at least some of them, you learn a little bit about Peter and a little tiny bit about Matthew, and you learn about Philip, but you don't learn a whole much more about the apostles and what they do. But if you go through the 14 books of Paul, you get a pretty good idea what takes place after Jesus' resurrection. So we're going to take it right up to then. And I think I've already decided that we're going to start the story over again, because so many people have come into this, halfway into the story, 3/4 of the way into the story, and they never had a chance. Even though you can go to Answers Heaven Speaks and you can go back to the beginning and listen to them, but I think as I give the story again a second time, with all of this fresh on my mind, I should be able to have a little more commentary as we're going through his early life, because I'll be able to bounce forward a little bit. I'll say, this is what's happening, and then remember it now in the previous story, and this happens in Jesus' life. At least that's the way I think it's going to go. But I think it would be wise to go back and just start the story all over again. And I hope that doesn't put anybody off, especially those who have been with this story right from the very beginning. And we started this sometime in May, and so we've gone June, July, August, September, October, November, December, now into January. I think it's taken me 8 months. 8 months to get through the story of Jesus from the Urantia book. And for those of you who don't understand what the Urantia book is and what this whole deal is with Marisa and I, the Urantia book is a channeled book. Everybody assumes that it was the sleeping prophet Edgar Casey that channeled this book, and it's a big book. But we're only dealing with the 4th section, which is the birth and life of Jesus Christ. When we start it over again, we'll also back up a little bit to learn a little bit more about the time of Jesus before he was born, what was going on politically and socially in the world at that time. But it's a comprehensive book. I mean, it's not as comprehensive as maybe we wish it would be, but it's very, very comprehensive. Whereas the Bible, to me, seems like a short story because there is so much left out of it. There's so much backstory. There's so much that goes on in Jesus' life, especially between his birth and his ministry, that nobody knows about. Nobody knows. Where did he go? What did he do? Who was his friends? Was he a normal guy? Did he play soccer? I don't think they had soccer back then. But, what kind of life was he leading before we got to know him in the Bible? So we'll backtrack and we'll go back into the story again. But we're right here at the end now. And at this point, as much as I want to watch the Chargers game, I don't have television where I'm staying right now. So there's no way I can watch the football game on Sunday. So I think on Sunday, I'll take tomorrow off, Saturday off. But on Sunday, I'm going to come back and I'll probably be doing at least a 2-hour show. And hopefully Marisa can come in because I want to cover the whole crucifixion. And it's going to take 2 hours. It's definitely going to take 2 hours. Just as when we get into the resurrection, that will probably be on Monday. And I may start an hour earlier. But even if I start at the same time, it's probably wise. We'll play it by ear, but I'm thinking it's probably wise to cover the time in the tomb and then the resurrection. What happened in the tomb? Exactly. What happened in that tomb after Jesus was put into, was it Joseph's? Joseph of Arimathea? Was set for his tomb, but it was given to Jesus. And something happened in there because at the time of the resurrection, there was no Jesus body there. So it's kind of interesting to get the universal personalities take on what happened. What just happened? What happened with the stone? The stone was rolled away. Remember, who rolled the stone away? And what's that whole story about? So I think we'll get into the crucifixion on Sunday. Normally I like to take Saturday and Sunday off, but I think it's pretty important at this time to keep the story going. Keep the story going. We're getting more and more people who are following the story, and I want to thank everybody for doing that. Had a real funny thing because they have, what's the term that these internet companies have? Oh gosh, I lose words, and it's so hard to bring them back. Gosh, I can't think of the word. It's their way of finding things and stopping your reporting or stopping your posts. And it's not arithmetic, it's something else. And you're probably all saying, oh, it's this, Joe. Come on, Joe. You can think of that. You can think of it. If I think of it, I'll bring it back up. But algorithms. I knew it started with an A. They have these algorithms. And so I don't think there's actually somebody that watches these posts from me. But in my descriptions, if I mention anything at all that has to do with politics, then they stop it. Anything of a social nature, what's going on in the world around us in a social manner, or in politics, they chop it off. And it's funny, a couple days ago, also for bad grammar or lewd behavior or words, cursing, what have you. And if you remember when we were discussing the story of Peter, he denied Christ 3 times before the cock crowed. And that's straight out of the Bible. Well, we all know that the cock is a rooster. But by algorithms, cock means something different. It's a man's economy, a man's... you know what I'm talking about. Anatomy. All these words starts with A. I can't come up with them. So they said, no, we're not posting your video. And so I had to go back and change the description from that to rooster. And doggone it, boing, up it came. And then yesterday I was mentioning that Jesus was going to go before Pilate, who was the Roman governor of Jerusalem, of Palestine. At least 3 big areas of Palestine. And they wouldn't allow my thing to post. And they said, no politics, no politics. I'm going, what? Come on, if a human person read that, they'd know what I meant. I mean, we're not talking about current day politics. We're talking about a Roman governor of the time of Jesus. But I changed it. I took it out. I took out the Roman governor out of there, and boing! They go, congratulations, your post can now be approved. So it's kind of hard dealing with that, and I have to be really careful. I also can't use the word I, because that's not... I have to use advertisement. I use my tithing to boost these out as far as I can into the world. And believe me, I've got a very small income. I may live very nicely, but I have a very small income. And so my tithing, I wish, could be a whole lot more. We're hoping we can get some stars from people, because that, if you hit stars, like 99 stars, we get 99 cents. And when we get to like $100, we can start boosting these out even a little bit farther. Things are kind of slow in that area because we don't push it. We don't push it. Marissa and I don't do this for money. We started doing this about 11 years ago. Marissa is a channeler, just like Edgar Casey was for the Arancha book. When I came to Christ after reading the Arancha book. I had read the Bible through 2 or 3 times, and it just... Nothing. It didn't get to me. God didn't get to my heart. I thought it was a great story. It was a great book. But there was just something there. I was agnostic. I'd read the Bible and I'd be going, no, this can't be true. And no, that's phony. No. I was so skeptical. I was so skeptical. And it wasn't until I read this book, this Urantia book, and learned the life of Jesus, that I went, oh my God, he's real. My God, he really is real. He's a real guy. Not just a real guy, but he's a real God. He is the creator of our universe. Now, there's lots and lots and lots of universes. There's like 35,000 of them. Oh no, I just lost my thing again. Doggone it. Let me get back up here. No, I can't. That can't be true. Oh, darn it. Darn. I hit the wrong button. Don't you ever do that? You write the perfect email. And let me get back in here again. Doggone it. This is so terrible. I just hit the wrong button and knocked my whole show off my screen. Now I got to go back again. Oh, darn it. Well, we're going to go to paper 185, or the pilot story. Doggone it. I can't believe it. Oh. You write the perfect email, and you've just written exactly what you want, and your stupid little finger hits a button, and it all disappears. You go, oh my God, how do I get that back? And then you start fiddling around and pushing buttons, and now it's really gone. It's absolutely gone. You just go, oh my God, how could I do that? How could I do that? And then you got to rewrite it, and when you rewrite it, it never comes out the same. It just you can't duplicate it again. And that's what I just did. I just knocked this whole thing off. Kind of did this yesterday when I was coming inside from outside, and let me see if I can get all the way down to our paper here. 181. I think it's paper 185. But I'm gonna have to pull all this stuff up again by Sunday. I had it all set up. Everything was all set up. The trial before pilot. So we're gonna have the trial before pilot, and then we're gonna have on Sunday. I'm gonna do two papers, and it should take probably a couple hours. One is just before the crucifixion, and then we'll have the actual crucifixion. And then the next day, which would probably be Monday, I don't know if I'm going to break this up or not. It's the time of the tomb and then the resurrection. So I don't know if I'm going to have a 2-hour show on Monday. I might have the time of the tomb, and then on Tuesday we'll cover the resurrection. But there's no way I can cover all of the crucifixion all the way through the resurrection. And then after that comes the Morancha appearances of Jesus. That's the resurrected body of Jesus and what he does. And then he has appearances to the apostles and other leaders, and then appearances in Galilee, and then final appearance and his ascension. And then comes the bestowal of the Spirit of truth, and then after Pentecost, and then we'll have a wrap-up, a conclusion on the faith of Jesus after that, and then we'll be done with the Jesus story. But that's still going to take us a week or two. Not sure exactly. But again, let's get into the trial before Pilate. And we had already covered a good part of this paper yesterday. We kind of explained who Pilate was. So if you didn't get a chance to see that yesterday, go back to yesterday's. We had a lot of people. I know in the world of internet, hundreds don't mean a whole lot, even thousands. Now our views aren't indicative of how many people are actually watching the whole show. Our views can be 10,000, 11,000, 12,000 people. In fact, we got 12,000 likes the other day on Instagram from our Sunday post. But we're more concerned with people something that's called through plays, and through plays are people who watch it for at least 15 seconds and over a minute, and take it on all the way, typically right up till the end. And fortunately, we had about 4,000 people yesterday go through that. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but our reach, as far as I try to send this out, sometimes my reach only goes out to 15,000 people. Sometimes it goes to 30. Sometimes, like this last weekend, I had a couple days where it went out to 80,000 and then 110,000. But I had 4,000, or we had 4,000 people watch the whole show yesterday, and it only went out to 25,000 people. That means it only went into 25,000 people's news feed, or their watch in the watch. And yet we've got this going out to so many countries now, and I feel really bad. I wish I could just spend a lot of money and make sure it goes out way far out there. And we've got it going out to so many countries now. It's funny because I recently added Lebanon, because Lebanon is actually it's a Christian country. It's Muslim, but it's also Christian. And I'll be doggone, I got a lot of views, not just views, a lot of through plays. I think it was something like almost 100 through plays just from Lebanon. But I get a lot of them from Venezuela for some reason. Venezuela, I get 400 or whatever. And Argentina, I get a lot. Not a whole lot from Brazil, but it breaks up into a number of cities in Brazil. But it's interesting to see who around the world is watching this story. And again, we're doing it because Jesus told us to do this. He said, you will spread my word. And we're going, how are we going to do that? 11 years ago. We're going, how are we going to do that? What am I going to do? Sit in front of the Bible? Am I going to read our texts from our sessions? What am I going to do? And so it's kind of hit and miss for almost 10 years or so. It's kind of hit and miss. I'd do shows for maybe a week, and then I'd stop. And I wouldn't do any for a couple weeks, and then I'd do a show here and there, here and there, and here and there. A lot of times having to do with our books, Marissa's and my books, which are spiritual and biblical. But it wasn't until something slapped me upside the head and said, let's just teach the story of Jesus, that we started on this, 8 months ago. So let's get into the story now without me babbling too much. Let me get some light on here. There we go with some light. And I should probably take my glasses off because I get that reflection. And as the day goes down, this screen is just going to get brighter and brighter. Let me move my cord. I heard something also that, I complained because I used to have these really good earbuds. And my dog Joey, before he was kidnapped by somebody on a motorcycle, stopped and stole my dog. Ugh, how frustrating. But Joey would chew on everything, absolutely everything. I call him a New York Joey. He always had something sticking out of his mouth. Well, he got a hold of my very expensive earbuds that Marissa had actually gotten for me. They were like, $200 or something like that. Well, he chewed them up to smithereens, and they were gone. So I had to start using these until I can afford to get some more earbuds. And then I was reading yesterday that doctors, people in the know, say that if you're going to use the earbuds, use these instead. The earbuds are okay if this is not appropriate, maybe for where you are, whatever, because there's 1,500, I think it's 1,500 times the EMF. That's electromagnetic field. EMF is electromagnetic field. The earbuds take in 1,500 times more EMF than these wired ones. So, protect your health. Don't spend the whole day with those earbuds in your ear. And if need be, if you need these for your work for some reason, look at me. Every day I've got these, and I got these stupid things hanging down below me. And sometimes my hair gets in the way and it crackles and does whatever, and that wouldn't happen with the earbuds. But just a thought. You can look it up. You can Google it. It's it came from some science site that I just happened to be watching yesterday. So let's get back into this is the trial. This is the trial of Pilate and before Pilate. Now keep in mind, yesterday we went through his trial before Caiaphas, who was the head priest, and he had gone through a similar interrogation before Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas and used to be the chief priest. And so the chief priests and about 30 Sanhedrins, they call them Sanhedrists. They were made up of the Sadducees, and they hated Jesus. They don't even believe in an afterlife. They don't even believe in angels. They just believe in the rules set down by Moses to keep society in order. So they were really sort of like judges, policemen. They were not really religious people, but they, doggone it, they stuck by those religious rules, and boy, you don't dare break them. And in their eyes, Jesus broke their rules. So now, but they can't put him to death unless he's been judged to go to death by the Romans, because the Romans, they occupy Jerusalem and Palestine. So even though Herod had chopped off John the Baptist's head, he wasn't judged by the Roman people. They're like, yeah. But in this case, they knew that Jesus was not a guilty man. But they wanted him to be put to death anyway. So they wanted the blame to fall on the Romans. They didn't want to say, we killed another prophet. Here comes another prophet. I think we shouldn't have done that. So now Jesus is before Pilate. And when Jesus and his accusers gathered in front of Pilate's judgment hall, the Roman governor came out, and addressing the company assembled, he asked, "What accusation do you bring against this fellow?" And the Sadducees and counselors, who had taken it upon themselves to put Jesus out of the way, had determined to go before Pilate and ask for confirmation of the death penalty pronounced upon Jesus, without volunteering any definite charge. They just said, okay, we want him put to death. We want you to say, okay, you go. Put him on a cross. Crucify him. Therefore did the spokesman of the Sanhedrin court answer Pilate, "If this man were not an evildoer, we should not have delivered him up to you." And when Pilate observed that they were reluctant to state their charges against Jesus, although he knew they had been all night engaged in deliberations regarding his guilt, he answered them, "Since you have not agreed on any definite charges, why do you not take this man and pass judgment on him in accordance with your laws?" And then spoke the clerk of the Sanhedrin court to Pilate, and said, "It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, and this disturber of our nation is worthy to die for the things which he has said and done." So I now have to correct that. I guess the Jews do have the rule of law to put men to death. So I guess there was no problem in them killing John the Baptist. Herod, doing it as a birthday gift to the daughter of Herodias, his wife. Therefore have we come before you for confirmation of this decree. To come before the Roman governor with this attempt at evasion discloses both the ill will and the ill humor of the Sanhedrin towards Jesus, as well as their lack of respect for the fairness and the honor and the dignity of Pilate. What effrontery for these subject citizens to appear before their provincial governor, asking for a decree of execution against a man before even affording him a fair trial, without even preferring definite criminal charges against him. Pilate knew something of Jesus' work among the Jews, and he surmised that the charges which might be brought against him had to do with infringements of the Jewish law, the Jewish ecclesiastical laws. Therefore, he sought to refer the case back to their own tribunal. Again, Pilate took delight in making them publicly confess that they were powerless to pronounce and execute the death sentence upon even one of their own race, whom they had come to despise with a bitter and envious hatred. It was a few hours previously, shortly before midnight, and after he had granted permission to use Roman soldiers in effecting the secret arrest of Jesus, that Pilate had heard further concerning Jesus and his teaching from his wife, Claudia, who was a partial convert to Judaism and who later on became a full-fledged believer in Jesus' gospel. Claudia, the wife of Pilate. Pilate would have liked to postpone this hearing, but he saw the Jewish leaders were determined to proceed with the case. And he knew that this was not only the forenoon of preparation for the Passover, but that this day, being Friday, was also the preparation day for the Jewish Sabbath of rest and worship. Pilate, being keenly sensitive to the disrespectful manner of the approach of these Jews, was not willing to comply with their demands. He didn't like the Jews because they were always holding something over his head. And they're going to hold something over his head again, you'll see. So he wasn't willing to comply with their demands that Jesus be sentenced to death without a real trial. I mean, Jesus wasn't even allowed to bring any witnesses. I mean, very late on Friday night, early Saturday morning, like midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. When, therefore, he had waited a few moments for them to present their charges against the prisoner, he turned to them and he said, I will not sentence this man to death without a trial. Neither will I consent to examine him until you have presented your charges against him to me in writing. So he wanted him in writing. When the high priest and the others heard Pilate say this, they signaled to the clerk of the court, who then handed to Pilate the written charges against Jesus. And again, these were the charges. We find in this Sanhedrin tribunal that this man is an evildoer and a disturber of our nation, in that he is guilty of 1, perverting our nation and stirring up our people to rebellion. Yeah, right. 2, forbidding the people to pay tribute to Caesar. Flat out lie. 3, calling himself the King of the Jews and teaching the founding of a new kingdom. Partially true. Half-truth. Half-truth. We see half-truths all the time in our world today, don't we? Half-truths. What did Mama say about half-truth? A half-truth is a lie. It's a lie. The whole truth is the whole truth, but when you give a half-truth, you're not telling the whole story. Jesus had not been regularly tried nor legally convicted on any of these charges. He didn't even hear these charges when he first stated, but Pilate had him brought from the praetorium, where he was in the keeping of the guards, and he insisted that these charges be repeated in Jesus' hearing. When Jesus heard these accusations, he well knew that he had not been heard on these matters before the Jewish court. And so did John Zebedee and his accusers. But he made no reply to their false charges. Jesus just, not saying anything. Unless it has something to do with the Son of Man, the Son of God. Then Jesus may say something. But when he's pressed with these charges, he doesn't deny them. In many ways, it's almost as if Jesus knew he was going to die. He needed to die. It was the only way to advance the kingdom. So he wasn't really defending himself real well. And he could have anyway. He had 12 legions, 72,000 angels at his disposal. He could have wiped everybody out if he wanted to. He could have wiped out the entire town, the whole city. He could have knocked it down. On top of all these angels, he had a whole universe of personalities. I mean, just picture the skies filled with universe beings, angels and other universe beings, all watching their creator being humiliated by a lowly bunch of humans who lie. Children of the devil, those who lie. Even when Pilate bade him answer his accusers, he did not open his mouth. And Pilate was so astonished at the unfairness of the whole proceeding and so impressed by Jesus' silent and masterly bearing that he decided to take the prisoner inside. He took him aside into the hall and to examine him privately. Pilate was confused in mind and he was fearful of the Jews. Remember yesterday, he's a coward because they had a couple things over on him and he was always afraid that they would go be tattletales to Caesar, which was Tiberius. The Caesar at that time was Tiberius. Pilate was confused in mind and fearful of the Jews in his heart and mightily stirred in his spirit by the spectacle of Jesus standing there in majesty before his bloodthirsty accusers and gazing down on them, not in silent contempt, but with an expression of genuine pity and sorrowful affection. Jesus is looking at him with pity and sorrowful affection. He knows they're all just a bunch of stupid humans. So we get into the private examination by Pilate. And Pilate took Jesus and John Zebedee together into a private chamber, leaving the guards outside in the hall and requesting the prisoner to sit down. And Jesus sat down. And then Pilate came and sat down right by his side, side by side. You can kind of picture him sitting on the edge of his chair going, "Hey, what's up? Why don't you answer my questions?" So he sat down by his side and he asked several questions. And Pilate began his talk with Jesus by assuring him that he did not believe the first count against him, that he was a perverter of the nation and an inciter of rebellion. Then he asked, "Did you ever teach that tribute should be refused Caesar?" And Jesus, pointing to John, said, Ask him. Ask him or any other man who has heard my teaching." Then Pilate questioned John about this matter of tribute, and John testified concerning his master's teaching and explained that Jesus and his apostles paid taxes, both to Caesar and to the temple. Remember? Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. Give to God what belongs to God. So when Pilate had questioned John, he said, "See that you tell no man that I talked with you." Boy. Pretty much what Jesus would always say to his followers. He'd say, when he'd have a one-on-one with them, he'd say, don't tell anybody we talked about this. And now Pilate does the same thing. He says to John, "See that you tell no man that I talked with you." Well, it ends up in the Bible. And John never did reveal this matter. Now, I'm going to have to double check that. See if John does talk about that. I don't think so. It's so short. The whole trial is very short in the book of John. I think it's chapter 18. Go back to John in the Bible and read it. It's very short. It's like bang, 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 crucified. Pilate then turned around to question Jesus further, saying, "And now about the third accusation against you. Are you the king of the Jews?" Since there was a tone of possibly sincere inquiry in Pilate's voice, Jesus just smiled on the procurator and said, "Pilate, do you ask this for yourself? Or do you take this question in front of these others, my accusers? Do you take this question from my accusers, or are you asking me on your own?" Whereupon, in a tone of partial indignation, the governor answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own people and the chief priests delivered you up and asked me to sentence you to death. I question the validity of their charges, and am only trying to find out for myself what you have done. Tell me, have you said that you are the king of the Jews? And have you sought to found a new kingdom?" And then Jesus said to Pilate, "Do you not perceive that my kingdom is not of this world?" I mean, that must have just straight over the head of Pilate. Do you not perceive that my kingdom is not of this world? If my kingdom were of this world, surely would my disciples fight that I should not be delivered into the hands of the Jews. My presence here before you in these bonds is sufficient to show all men that my kingdom is a spiritual dominion. Even the brotherhood of men who, through faith and by love, have become the sons of God. And Jesus finishes saying, "And this salvation is for the Gentile as well as for the Jew." And then Pilate says, "Then you are a king after all." And Jesus answered, "Yes, I am such a king. And my kingdom is the family of the faith sons of my Father, who is in heaven. For this purpose was I born into this world, even that I should show my Father to all men and bear witness to the truth of God. And even now do I declare to you that everyone who loves the truth, hears my voice." And what does Pilate say? Pilate says, "Truth? What is truth? Who knows? What is truth?" Pilate was not able to fathom Jesus' words, nor was he able to understand the nature of his spiritual kingdom. But he was now certain that the prisoner had done nothing worthy of death. One look at Jesus face to face was enough to convince even Pilate that this gentle and weary but majestic and upright man was no wild and dangerous revolutionary who aspired to establish himself on the temporal throne of Israel, like everybody in the Jews wanted him to be. They wanted him to be a ruler on a throne. They wanted their Messiah to be a conqueror, smiter of the Jews' enemies. But Pilate saw that that wasn't what he was here for. Pilate thought he understood something of what Jesus meant when he called himself a king, for he was familiar with the teachings of the Stoics, who declared that the wise man is a king. Stoicism is, we would probably relate that more towards Buddhism today. Pilate was thoroughly convinced that instead of being a dangerous sedition monger, Jesus was nothing more or less than a harmless visionary, maybe even an innocent fanatic. You know what Judas thought also? At least he didn't say he thought he was a clown like Judas. After questioning the master, Pilate went back to the chief priests and the accusers of Jesus and said, "I've examined this man, and I find no fault in him. I do not think he is guilty of the charge you have made against him. I think he ought to be set free." And when the Jews heard this, they were moved with great anger, and so much so that they wildly shouted that Jesus should die. And one of the Sanhedrin boldly stepped up by the side of Pilate, saying, "This man stirs up the people, beginning in Galilee and continuing throughout all of Judea. He is a mischief maker and an evildoer, and you will long regret it if you let this wicked man go free." Pilate was hard-pressed to know what to do with Jesus, therefore, when he heard them say that he began his work in Galilee, he thought to avoid the responsibility now of deciding the case, and at least to gain time for thought, by sending Jesus to appear before Herod. After all, Herod was the king of the Jews. More like a secular king, not a spiritual king, sitting on his throne in his big palace. So he decided to send Jesus over to Herod, who was then in the city also attending the Passover. And Pilate also thought that this gesture would help to antidote some of the bitter feeling which had existed for some time between himself and Herod. There's bitter feelings between the governor and the king, so to speak, due to numerous misunderstandings over matters of jurisdiction. Remember, Pilate wanted the Jews to pay for a new aqueduct out of their temple funds instead of the Roman government paying for a new aqueduct, and that created a lot of problems. Pilate, calling the guards, said, "This man is a Galilean. Take him forthwith to Herod. When he has examined him, report his findings to me." And so they ended up taking Jesus over to Herod. Now, Jesus is before Herod. When Herod Antipas stopped in Jerusalem, he dwelt in the old Maccabean palace of Herod the Great, the first Herod. And it was to this home of the former king that Jesus was now taken by the temple guards, and he was followed by his accusers and an increasing multitude. Now Herod had long heard of Jesus, and he was very curious about him. Well, it was Herod that put out a warrant for his arrest. So yeah, he knew about him. But remember when he was up in the jurisdiction of what was his brother's name? I think was Peter, Joseph, Paul. I can't remember what the name of Herod's brother was, but while Jesus was up in his brother's jurisdiction, the warrant didn't take effect. It had to be down in Judea. But Herod was the one that sent out the warrant, gave the warrant to the chief priests in the first place. But Herod had long heard of Jesus, and he was very curious about him. And when the Son of Man stood before him on this Friday morning, the wicked Idumean, never for one moment recalled the lad of former years who had appeared before him in Sepphoris, pleading for a just decision regarding the money due his father, who had been accidentally killed while at work at one of the public office buildings. Pretty sure he was killed on the work on Herod's palace, not on a public building. But anyway, if you remember in the story, if you've been with me that long, you'll remember when Joseph died, Jesus was 14, and Herod wouldn't give the family the pay that was due Joseph. Even like when somebody does die, they're supposed to also get an extra stipend. And Herod didn't give him anything. And Jesus always had a very terrible taste in his mouth about Herod. Even called him a snake. Snake. As far as Herod knew, he had never seen Jesus, although he had worried a great deal about him when his work had been centered in Galilee. Now that he was in custody of Pilate and the Judeans, Herod was desirous of seeing him, feeling secure against any trouble from him in the future. Herod had heard much about the miracles wrought by Jesus, and he really hoped to see him do some wonder. So Herod's going to want him to stand there and do these miracles to prove that he's who he is. So when they brought Jesus before Herod, the Tetrarch was startled by his stately appearance and the calm composure of his countenance. And for some 15 minutes, Herod asked Jesus questions. But Jesus wouldn't answer. Herod taunted and dared him to perform a miracle. But Jesus would not reply to his many inquiries, much less respond to his taunts to create a miracle. Then Herod turned to the chief priests and the Sadducees, and giving ear to their accusations, heard all and more than Pilate had listened to regarding the alleged evil doings of the Son of Man. Finally, being convinced that Jesus would neither talk nor perform a wonder for him, Herod, after making fun of him for for a time, for a little while, arrayed him in an old purple royal robe. So Herod gave him an old purple robe and sent him back to Pilate. Herod knew he had no jurisdiction over Jesus in Judea, though he was glad to believe that he was finally to be rid of Jesus in Galilee. He was thankful that it was Pilate who had the responsibility of putting him to death. Herod never had fully recovered from the fear that cursed him as a result of killing John the Baptist. Herod had certain times even feared that Jesus was actually John the Baptist risen from the grave. Now he was relieved of that fear, since he observed that Jesus was a very different sort of person from the outspoken and fiery prophet who dared to expose John the Baptist, expose and denounce his private life, which John did. And for those of you who have followed the story, you know we went into the whole story of John the Baptist. So now Jesus is being returned to Pilate again. When the guards, how are we doing on this? We may run, oh my gosh, we may run a little bit long here. When the guards had brought Jesus back to Pilate, he went out on the front steps of the praetorium where his judgment seat had been placed, and calling together the chief priests and Sanhedrin, said to them, "You brought this man before me with charges that he perverts the people, forbids the payment of taxes, and claims to be king of the Jews. I have examined him and failed to find him guilty of these charges. In fact, I find no fault in him at all. Then I sent him to Herod, and the tetrarch must have reached the same conclusion, since he has now sent him back to me. Certainly nothing worthy of death has been done by this man. If you still think he needs to be disciplined, I am willing to chastise him before I release him." And just as the Jews were about to engage in shouting their protests against the release of Jesus, a vast crowd came marching up to the praetorium for the purpose of asking Pilate for the release of a prisoner in honor of the Passover feast. For some time it had been the custom of the Roman governor to allow the populace to choose some imprisoned or condemned man for pardon at the time of the Passover. And now that this crowd had come before him to ask for the release of a prisoner, and since Jesus had so recently been in great favor with the multitudes, it occurred to Pilate that he might possibly extricate himself from his predicament by proposing to this group that, since Jesus was now a prisoner before his judgment seat, he released them to this man of Galilee as a token of a Passover of goodwill. But the crowd surged up on the strips and on the steps of the building, and Pilate heard them calling out of the name of one of the prisoners, "Barabbas! Barabbas!" Was a noted political agitator and a murderous robber. He was also the son of a priest who had recently been apprehended in the act of robbery and murder on the Jericho road. This man was under sentence to die as soon as the Passover festivities were over. So Pilate stood up and explained to the crowd that Jesus had been brought to him by the chief priests, who sought to have him put to death on certain charges, and that he did not think the man was worthy of death. So said Pilate, "Which, therefore, would you prefer, that I release to you, this Barabbas, the murderer, or this Jesus of Galilee?" And when Pilate had thus spoken, the chief priests and the Sanhedrin counselors all shouted at the top of their voices, "Barabbas! Barabbas!" And when the people saw that the chief priests were minded to have Jesus put to death, they quickly joined in the clamor for his life, while they loudly shouted for the release of Barabbas! Barabbas! Release him! A few days before this, the multitude had stood in awe of Jesus. But the mob did not look up to the one who, having claimed to be the Son of God, now found himself in the custody of the chief priests and the rulers, and on trial before Pilate for his life. Jesus could be a hero in the eyes of the populace when he was driving the money changers and the traders, the commercial infiltrators out of the temple, but not when he was a non-resisting prisoner in the hands of his enemies and on trial for his life. Remember, he lost all his followers after he fed 5,000 people, remember? Because they wanted him to proclaim himself as the Messiah. Jesus wouldn't proclaim himself as the Messiah, so they all just went away. Stupid people. Stupid people. How are we doing on time on here? Let me see how we're doing. My gosh, there's no way I'm going to be able to get this done. We're going to have to take this over to Sunday. Let me go a little bit farther. Pilate was angered at the sight of the chief priests clamoring for the pardon of a notorious murderer while they shouted for the blood of Jesus. He saw their malice and hatred and perceived their prejudice and envy. Therefore he said to them, Pilate said to them, "How could you choose the life of a murderer in preference to this man, whose worst crime is that he figuratively calls himself the King of the Jews?" But this was not a wise statement for the Pilate to make. The Jews were a proud people and now subject to the Roman political yoke, but hoping for the coming of a Messiah who would deliver them from Gentile bondage with a great show of power and glory. That's what they wanted in Jesus. So they see him as a wimp. They resented more than Pilate could know the intimation that this meek-mannered teacher of strange doctrines, now under arrest and charged with crimes worthy of death, should be referred to as the King of the Jews. They looked upon such a remark as an insult to everything which they held sacred and honorable in their national existence. And therefore did they all let loose their mighty shouts for Barabbas, Barabbas, release Barabbas, and Jesus shall die. Pilate knew Jesus was innocent of the charges brought against him, and had he been a just and courageous judge, he would have acquitted him and turned him loose. But he was afraid to defy these angry Jews, and while he hesitated to do his duty, a messenger came up and presented him with a sealed message from his wife, Claudia. Pilate indicated to those assembled before him that he wished to read the letter which he had just received before he proceeded further with the matter before him. When Pilate opened this letter from his wife, it read, "I pray you have nothing to do with this innocent and just man whom they call Jesus. I have suffered many things in a dream this night because of him." This note from Claudia not only greatly upset Pilate and thereby delayed the adjudication of the matter, but it unfortunately also provided considerable time in which the Jewish rulers freely circulated among the crowd and urged the people to call for the release of Barabbas and to clamor even the more for the crucifixion of Jesus. Finally, Pilate addressed himself once more to the solution of the problem which confronted him by asking the mixed assembly of Jewish rulers and the pardon-seeking crowd, "What shall I do with him, who is called the King of the Jews?" And they all shouted with one accord, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" The unanimity of this demand from the mixed multitude startled and alarmed Pilate, the unjust and fear-ridden judge. He's a coward. Then once more Pilate said, "Why would you crucify this man? What evil has he done? Who will come forward to testify against him?" But when they heard Pilate speak in defense of Jesus, they only cried out all the more, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Then again Pilate appealed to them regarding the release of the Passover prisoner, saying, "Once more I ask you, which of these prisoners shall I release to you at this time, your Passover time?" And again the crowd shouted, "Give us Barabbas! We want Barabbas!" Then said Pilate, "If I release the murderer Barabbas, what shall I do with Jesus?" And once more the multitude shouted in unison, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" And Pilate was terrorized by the insistent clamor of the mob, acting under the direct leadership of the chief priests and the counselors of the Sanhedrin. Nevertheless, he decided upon at least one more attempt to appease the crowd and save Jesus. Pilate's last appeal. In all that is transpiring early this Friday morning before Pilate, only the enemies of Jesus are participating. His many friends either do not yet even know of his arrest and the early morning trial. They don't even know. They've been sleeping through the night. Or they're in hiding, lest they also be approached and apprehended and judged worthy of death themselves, because they believe Jesus' teachings. In the multitude which now clamors for the Master's death are to be found only his sworn enemies and the easily led and unthinking populace. Pilate would make one last appeal to their pity, being afraid to defy the clamor of this misled mob who cried for the blood of Jesus. He ordered the Jewish guards and the Roman soldiers to take Jesus and scourge him. And this was in itself an unjust and an illegal procedure, since the Roman law provided that only those condemned to die, he has not yet been condemned to die, but only those that are condemned to die by crucifixion should be thus subjected to scourging, whipping. The guards took Jesus into the open courtyard of the praetorium for that ordeal. And though his enemies did not witness his scourging, Pilate did. And before they had finished this wicked abuse, he directed the scourgers to desist and indicated that Jesus should be brought to him. And before the scourgers laid their knotted whips upon Jesus as he was bound to the whipping post, they again put upon him the purple robe, and planting and plaiting a crown, putting on a crown of thorns upon his brow. And when they had put a reed in his hand as a mock scepter, a reed, just a reed, a bamboo reed, they knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews! Hail, King of the Jews!" And then they spit on him. And then they struck him in the face with their hands. And one of them, before they returned him to Pilate, took the reed from his hand and struck him upon the head. Then Pilate led forth this bleeding and lacerated prisoner, and presenting him before the mixed multitude, said, "Behold the man! Again I declare to you that I find no crime in him. And having scourged him, I would release him." And there stood Jesus of Nazareth, clothed in an old purple robe, with a crown of thorns piercing his kindly brow. His face was blood-stained, and his form bowed down with suffering and grief. But nothing can appeal to the unfeeling hearts of those who are victims of intense emotional hatred and slaves to religious prejudice. This sight sent a mighty shudder, just a mighty shudder through the realms of a vast universe. They're all watching this. But it did not touch the hearts of those who had to set their minds to effect the destruction of Jesus. When they had recovered from the first shock of seeing the Master's plight, they only shouted the louder and the longer, and they kept saying, "Crucify him! Crucify him! Crucify him!" And now did Pilate comprehend that it was futile to appeal to their supposed feelings of pity. So Pilate stepped forward and said, "I perceive that you are determined that this man shall die. But what has he done to deserve death? Who will declare his crime?" Then the high priest himself stepped forward, probably Caiaphas, and going up to Pilate angrily declared, "We have a sacred law, and by that law this man ought to die, because he made himself out to be the Son of God." And when Pilate heard this, he was all the more afraid, not only of the Jews, but recalling his wife's note and the Greek mythology, Stoics, of the gods coming down on earth. He now trembled at the thought of Jesus possibly being a divine personage. He waved to the crowd to hold its peace while he took Jesus by the arm and again led him inside the building that he might further examine him. Pilate was now confused by fear and he bewildered now by superstition as well, and harassed by the stubborn attitude of the mob. Should I do Pilate's last interview? I think it's going to take me too far. This will be a good lead-in to Sunday, because this is now Pilate's last interview. And then they're going to take him away, and there's going to be some commentary by the midwayers, and I've already gone my hour now. Sunday I'll go 2 hours because I want to do the crucifixion, but we want to go over what happens before the crucifixion. And I think, boy, should I? I don't see Marisa coming on here, so I'm not sure what to do. Pilate's last interview. Let me go through this, and then it's going to take a few minutes, and then we'll probably get into the commentary to lead into the crucifixion on Sunday. I know you're all going to be watching football and having a great Sunday. It's probably very cold where you are, so you want to stay inside. You don't have to listen to this live, but hopefully you'll have a chance to listen to it maybe when you're going to go to bed, maybe a little bit before you go to bed. As I say, if you want to go to sleep, if you're an insomniac, just put my show, our show, on the side of your bed and listen to it. And before you know it, you're going to be asleep. Poppy, get out from my feet. No, you know what? I'm going to hold off. I'm going to get into Pilate's last interview because that leads right into him. Well, it leads us into finding out what happens to Judas, and then it leads us up into the actual crucifixion itself. So we will do the crucifixion on Sunday. I don't always like to do a show on Sunday, but I feel like it's probably time. I think we should do it again. And it's been a while since I've done a Sunday show. I know Marisa's really busy. She's very busy, I think, with some insurance matters. I'm going to see if she's there. If she's not, we're going to have to just pass. Nope, we don't have Marisa there. So she's very busy. She let me know that when she gets on this phone with this insurance agent or whatever, because she's got a claim, she got robbed. She got robbed by people with guns and everything, and just took everything from her. And then she got robbed again. Somebody broke out the windows of her car and took things. So she's constantly fighting with the insurance companies to settle this matter, and it's hard for her to talk to the one person at the insurance company that gives the final approval to accommodate those who are wrongfully afflicted. And so I'll bet you anything she's on that call and she just can't break away. So I'm going to ask Marisa to come in on Sunday. She'll probably listen as we're going through Jesus' crucifixion on Sunday, and we'll go as long as we need to. If it takes an hour, we'll go an hour. If it takes 2 hours, we'll go 2 hours. If it takes more than 2 hours, we're going to go more than 2 hours. But that'll be on Sunday, and you know, what good is on TV anyway? Especially if your football team isn't in the hunt anymore. Do you really want to sit around all day Sunday from early morning all the way till the last Sunday night football game, just watching football? It's kind of nice to learn what's going on with Jesus, and we all know this story. This is the part of the story we all know about. But again, we get some backstory. We get some other information. We get other information from those midwayers who Marisa claims they look like turnips. But what they are, and oh boy, they may get mad at me for that, but they are balls of energy, but they also have personalities. But they're not angels and they're not souls. They come from their own domain somewhere up there in the universe somewhere, and what they are is they're historians. They know everything. They're like tape recorders. They tape it all. It's all there. So we get their account, and that's what we've got. We've got the account from the midwares. So let's call it a day for a Friday, and let's look forward to having a show on Sunday, and see where it goes from there. Monday will probably be his time in the tomb, and then on Tuesday we'll probably have his resurrection. But let's play it by ear a little bit. Again, I don't really want to go too long, and so let's cut it off at this point. So again, we've missed Marisa, but you can go back this week, listen to some of Marisa's channelings, because she channels, yes, universe personalities, but she also channels Jesus. And over this last week, she's had some messages to us, to everyone, from Jesus. She also told us, Jesus also told us, when I was really mad about what's going on after the elections here in the United States, and then the election that happened in Brazil, and I was really, really upset about what was going on, he said, just don't worry about it. He said, don't worry about it. Evil has now been exposed. It's been exposed. So over the next 7 months, the white horse is going to come in. So Marisa says the white horse is here already. And but so is the red horse and the black horse and the pale horse. They're all here now. They're not in their little 7-year periods. So something amazing is going on up there. In that war between good and evil. Things are getting real interesting, folks. So hang in here. Let's hope that God's will is in our favor. God's will is in our favor. Do I still see Marisa's light? No, she's not coming on. So we're going to have to hold on to Marisa. Marisa's going to have to come. Is she leaving me a message? No. Oh, well, let me say hi to a few people. Hi, Sean. Sean's PV from Puerto Vallarta, but lives in Canada. Hi, Maxon Marticio. Oh no, and I can't hear a thing. And I am all bars, and I'm so annoyed. Not frozen for me. Oh, good. Oh, Marissa's saying. Oh no, don't tell me this whole thing's been frozen. Oh my God. Sometimes I just need to check these things. You probably, guys, Rachel. Hi, Rachel Floyd. Marissa's watching, but how about Anna? Anna's there. Paula. Why don't you guys hear this? I'm going to go back and listen to this. I may have to do this whole show over again. Hi, Sheila. Sheila Lowe's there. Got a bunch of people watching. Just trying to reconnect. I'm going to screw this thing up somehow. Okay, for all of those of you who have heard me today, thank you very much. Many of you are probably just watching me moving my lips. Do the will of the Father. Enjoy your Friday night. I'm going to go back and before I allow this to go on, I'm going to make sure that there was actually sound in this. If it's been broken up throughout, then we're probably going to have to do this whole thing all over again on Sunday. So God bless all of you. Have yourself a very safe and a good weekend. Do the will of the Father. And God willing, I'll be back here on Sunday. Either redoing this show or moving on into the crucifixion. All right, so take care. God bless. Joe Morris, Answers Heaven Speaks. Marisa Morris, she's not here doing any channeling today, but hopefully she'll be with us on Sunday. We'll see what happens. All right? So everybody, take care. Thanks again for being part of this show.